Let's talk about the unsolved disappearance of 6-year-old Dennis Martin in the Appalachian Mountains. Father's Day, June 1969, Dennis, his brother, his father, and his grandfather took a Father's Day trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in the Appalachian Mountains. The trip was a tradition for the Martin family and nothing they hadn't done before. But unfortunately for them, this is a trip they would never, ever forget. The family hiked from Cades Cove to Russell Field and camped overnight, and the next day they hiked to Spence Field, which is just off the Appalachian Trail. It was in Spence Field where they camped for a couple of days and they met another family who also happened to have young boys. Dennis, his brother, and the other young boys really enjoyed each other's company, and they started playing pranks on their respective families. They would hide in the bushes and jump out at them. But after a couple of times of them feeling like the parents had them figured out, they decided to change up their strategy a little bit, and the other boys asked Dennis to take off his red shirt because they felt that the parents could see his red shirt through the bushes, and that's how they were being given away. The boys were within eye view of their parents, but Dennis removes his shirt and continues to play the same game. Most of the boys went to the left, Dennis went to the right, and the last time his father saw him, he was crouching behind a bush, getting ready to scare them. And for all intents and purposes after that point, Dennis disappeared off the face of the earth. The boys returned and Dennis did not. Dennis' father, William, stood up to try to find him. It was very clear after only 30 seconds he was nowhere in sight. Dennis's family becomes panicked, along with the other families who were at the campsite at the time, and Dennis's father runs 2 miles up the Appalachian Trail shouting his name and searching for him, and it was very clear at that point he was nowhere to be found. Shortly after they discovered Dennis disappeared, a huge storm rolled in that laid out over 3 inches of rain, which, when you're missing someone in the wilderness, any kind of tracks that you can find that may have been theirs are extremely helpful. And unfortunately, that storm washed those away. Dennis's grandfather hiked to the nearest ranger station. He gets to the ranger station, it's almost after 9 o'clock, and that's when the official search begins. The National Guard, multiple police agencies, and over 1,500 volunteers searched 56 square miles of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park without finding a trace of him. The only potential trace that they found of him were a child's footprints near a stream where one of the feet had a shoe on it and the other foot appeared to be barefoot. Those footprints disappeared as soon as they entered the stream. While interviewing witnesses, a man came forward and said that he heard a scream shortly after the time of Dennis's disappearance, followed by a figure running through the woods with something red in its hands, which seemingly seemed to be Dennis's shirt that he took off. They searched the forest for days to follow with absolutely no leads, and eventually the search was called off, and there were no other witnesses, leads, or anything until 1985. In 1985, a man who was out hunting for ginseng came forward and said, shortly after Dennis's disappearance in 1969, he discovered what appeared to be a child's skeletal remains scattered on the floor of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, but didn't report his findings because he was afraid he was going to be prosecuted for harvesting the ginseng. Unfortunately, when they went back to the site where he said he saw them, they were nowhere to be found, and that lead was completely a dead end. But this is where it gets really interesting to me. There's long since been a theory in the Appalachian Mountains and in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park that there is a subset of people who live within the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Appalachian Mountains as a whole, and people categorize them as feral people. They also assume they are responsible for a lot of the unsolved missing person cases, and I just find that to be really interesting. It kind of seems like a random theory, but when you really take some time to look into these feral human subcultures in these national parks, especially in the Appalachian Mountains, they seem to hold a little bit of weight. I'm unsure though. Another interesting point to add, shortly after Dennis's disappearance, a man came forward and said that the Federal Bureau of Investigations, or the FBI, hired him to hunt these feral people because of their connections to so many unsolved missing person cases in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, there's really not a lot of information on whether his claims were substantiated at all, but it makes you think. I have heard of these feral people or wild people many times throughout my upbringing, and I always come back to how interesting that whole thing can be. There's a lot of theories that they take children and livestock in order to feed themselves. A lot of people attribute Dennis and many other unsolved missing person cases to the paranormal activity that occurs in the Appalachian Mountains. So I'm curious to hear what you think. To me, I don't think he was kidnapped because truly he was 6 years old, and I don't find it even close to fathomable that a 6-year-old child was able to travel 56 square miles in a matter of just a couple days during that search. And if you have any information about Dennis or his disappearance, contact the FBI, and I will leave that information in the caption. Love you.